Daniel returned home feeling relieved, only to be confronted by his father, a strict old-fashioned man. His father laid out a condition. Daniel must find a woman to marry before he could inherit the family's company. Daniel was shocked, but he knew his father was dead serious. Panicked, Daniel thought of Angela. He quickly called her, explaining the situation, and asked her to pose as his wife-to-be. He promised to give her even more money, along with a rented apartment, so she wouldn't have to live in the streets anymore. Tempted by the offer, Angela agreed. Days later, Daniel introduced Angela to his family. They arrived at the grand estate, and Angela confidently greeted his father, speaking with confidence and grace. Daniel's father, initially skeptical, softened as Angela impressed him with her intelligence and charm. This was just the beginning of an unusual partnership. Angela spoke about her background carefully, crafting a story that matched what Daniel had told her. She didn't try too hard to impress, but her natural charm was undeniable. Before long, Daniel's father was captivated. The way Angela carried herself, the way she spoke, it all seemed genuine. He had expected someone shallow or materialistic, but instead, he found a woman who appeared thoughtful and kind. He was impressed, something Daniel hasn't seen in his father for a very long time. By the end of the evening, Daniel's father was completely won over. He even pulled Daniel aside at one point, quietly telling him that Angela was exactly the kind of woman he had always hoped his son would marry. He praised her intelligence, her beauty, and most of all, her composure. Daniel was relieved, though a bit surprised by how quickly things had turned in his favor. His father, who was often difficult to please, had fallen for Angela almost immediately. The pressure of the evening had lifted, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. Angela played her role perfectly throughout the night. She laughed at the right moment, complimented Daniel's mother, and even shared a few stories that made Daniel's father laugh. As they drove away from the estate, Daniel couldn't help but glance at Angela in the passenger seat. She had delivered far beyond what he had expected, and for the very first time, he realized that she wasn't just some homeless girl playing a part. There was something deeper about her, something he hadn't seen before. When they arrived at Angela's apartment, Daniel felt a need to clear the air. He looked at her seriously, thanking her for all her help. He admitted that she had played her role perfectly and that he couldn't have asked for more. But then, with a deep breath, he told her something she needed to hear. While he appreciated her, he didn't love her. He was grateful for what he had done for him and his family, but there was no romantic feelings between them. He wanted her to understand that nothing beyond their arrangement would come from this. It was all just business. Angela was unbothered. She told Daniel she didn't care. Love wasn't why she was doing this. As long as he kept paying her, that was all that matters to her. She wasn't interested in romance, just the money. She had no feelings for him either, and she made that clear. For her, this was just a way to get off the streets and nothing more. Daniel nodded, feeling relieved that they were on the same page. He had been worried things might get complicated, but Angela's calmness reassured him. They said their goodbyes, and Angela went inside her apartment while Daniel drove home. A few days later, Daniel's father called him. He wanted Angela to spend the weekend at the family house. His father had grown fond of her even more than Daniel had expected. Angela had charmed him completely, and now he wanted to get to know her better. Daniel felt a knot in his stomach. knowing that keeping this act up was becoming more complicated. But he had no choice. His father's approval was everything he needed. When Daniel told Angela about the invitation, she agreed without wasting time. More money and more time in a comfortable house were good enough reasons for her. She packed a small bag and made sure to look her best when Daniel picked her up. As they arrived at the family estate, Daniel's father greeted Angela with open arms. He was clearly thrilled to see her again, treating her like she was already part of the family. He showered her with compliments, telling her how much he admired her grace and intelligence. Angela smiled politely, keeping up the act. Everything was going according to plan, and she played her part perfectly. However, Daniel's mother wasn't so easily convinced. From the moment Angela stepped through the door, her eyes followed her, watching her every move. She was suspicious, though she couldn't explain why. Something about Angela didn't sit right with her. She felt like she had seen Angela before, but couldn't place where. Beyond that, she didn't believe the story Daniel had told about how they met. It felt all too rushed, too convenient. As the weekend went on, Daniel's father only grew more attached to Angela. He loved how well she spoke, how kind she was to everyone, and how she seemed to understand the family so well. He would pull Daniel aside, praising Angela and telling him how lucky he was to have found such a beautiful woman. Daniel forced a smile each time, knowing the truth but unable to say anything. Angela, meanwhile, did her best to blend. She talked with Daniel's father, laughed at his jokes, and charmed other guests who visited during the weekend. But every time she looked over at Daniel's mother, she could feel the coldness in her stare. The tension was undeniable. Later that night, when they were alone, Angela brought it up to Daniel. She told him he didn't think his mother liked her. There was something in the way she looked at her, something off. Daniel sighed, knowing his mother very well. He assured Angela not to worry. His mother could be difficult sometimes, but this was all for the meantime. They only had to keep up the act for a little longer, and once the company was his, everything would be fine. He promised Angela that he would find a perfect solution soon. Angela nodded but wasn't fully convinced. She knew Daniel's mother was no fool. If she kept digging, it wouldn't be long before she uncovered the truth. But for now, Angela would stick to the plan. The money was too good to walk away from, and she had already come too far. The weekend ended with Daniel's father more convinced than ever that Angela was the right woman for his son. He even began talking about wedding plans, telling Daniel he couldn't wait to see him get married and start a family. Daniel, trapped by his own lies, could only smile and nod, knowing he was running out of time to come up with a better solution. As they drove back to Angela's apartment, the weight of the situation began to press on Daniel. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. His father was expecting a marriage, his mother was growing more suspicious, and Angela, though playing her part, wasn't someone he could truly rely on for the long term. He needed to figure out what to do before everything goes out of control. Angela, on the other hand, was already counting the money in her head, wondering just how much more she could get out of this arrangement before it all comes to an end. Meanwhile, Monica, Daniel's girlfriend, had grown suspicious over the past few weeks. He had been distant, not answering her calls like before, and his excuses for missing their usual dates were getting more ridiculous. She knew something was off. After hearing that Daniel had been spending time with Angela, she decided to investigate. It didn't take long for her to find out that Angela was the same homeless girl Daniel had shouted at the street weeks earlier. The pieces of the puzzle began to come together, and Monica realized that Angela and Daniel had planned the whole thing. Angry and feeling betrayed, Monica went straight to Angela's apartment. She knocked on the door, and when Angela opened it, she was met with Monica's anger. Without holding back, Monica told Angela to leave Daniel alone. She claimed that Daniel was her boyfriend, not Angela's, and that Angela had no right to be with him. Angela didn't flinch. Instead, she looked at Monica with anger, as if she found the whole situation amusing. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and listened to Monica rant until she finished. Angela stood her ground and bluntly insulted Monica, calling her desperate and pathetic for clinging to a man who clearly had no interest in her anymore. Angela reminded her that she, not Monica, was the one Daniel had chosen to bring home. Humiliated, Monica had no choice but to leave. However, Monica was not ready to give up. As soon as she got home, she made up a plan. If she couldn't get rid of Angela directly, she would use Daniel's mother to do the job. The next morning, Monica called Daniel's mother and told her everything about how Daniel and Angela lied about their relationship, how Angela was a homeless orphan, and how the entire relationship was a scheme to win Daniel's father's favor. She emphasized Angela's poor background, knowing that this would anger Daniel's mother even more. Upon hearing the news, Daniel's mother was furious. The thought of her son marrying someone from such background made her angry. She had always envisioned Daniel with someone from a wealthy family, someone who shared their high social status. To her, poor people could never understand the privileged life her family led. The idea of Daniel being tied to someone like Angela was unbearable for her. As Monica continued to spill the details of Angela's past, Daniel's mother made up her mind. She would never let her son marry a poor girl like Angela, no matter what. Monica, feeling satisfied, believed it was only a matter of time before Daniel came back to her. Daniel's mother wasted no time. She confronted her son that very day. She barged into his office, her face twisted in anger, and demanded to know how he could consider marrying a homeless orphan. Daniel quickly tried to calm her down, explaining that it was all part of the plan to secure his father's approval. He assured her that once the company was handed over, Angela would be out of the picture. It was all just an act, he said. But his mother wasn't convinced. She had noticed how Daniel looked at Angela, how he softened around her. She didn't believe for a second that this was just an act. She reminded Daniel of the family's investment in his future and how they had raised him to uphold their legacy and not to marry someone without money or status. Daniel felt trapped. His mother wasn't going to let this go, but he also knew that Angela had become more than just a pawn in his plan. She was an essential part of his life now, and if his father found out the truth, everything would crumble. When Daniel's mother got home, she told his father everything, expecting him to be angry. To her surprise, he remained calm and told her that he didn't mind Angela's background. In fact, he had grown fond of her and liked her humble nature. What made him upset was Daniel's dishonesty, not Angela's lack of wealth. Daniel's mother was so shocked. She expected that her husband would be angry, but he was not. Shortly after, Daniel's father called his son to the house. When Daniel arrived, he expected that his father would be so angry, but his father acknowledged the lie, but just wanted to know the truth. After hesitating, Daniel admitted that while the relationship with Angela had started as a part of his plan, he had genuinely fallen in love with her. His father, smiling, advised Daniel to tell Angela how he truly felt. Sometimes the most unexpected people bring the greatest joy, he reminded him. Encouraged, Daniel decided to follow his father's advice. The next day, Daniel went to Angela's apartment, his heart racing. When she opened the door, he nervously confessed his love for her, explaining how unexpected it had been, but how much she now meant to him. Angela listened quietly, and when he was done, she smiled, admitting that she had loved him too. Filled with joy, Daniel proposed to her on the spot, and Angela accepted without hesitation. Their love was now real, and both felt a weight lift from their hearts. Meanwhile, Monica, furious at the news of their engagement, made one last attempt to turn Daniel's mother against Angela. But this time, Daniel's mother wasn't moved. She had seen how happy Angela made her son and had come to support their relationship. Monica, stunned and humiliated, left in defeat. A week later, unable to bear the shame, she packed her bags and moved to Europe, hoping to start afresh. With Monica out of their lives, Daniel and Angela's relationship blossomed. 2 months later, they stood before their loved ones, exchanging vows in a beautiful, intimate ceremony. Daniel, once so focused on his plan, now stood beside the woman he truly loved, ready to start a new chapter of their lives. Angela's journey is truly inspiring, showing how love and inner strength can transform even the most challenging situations to a positive one. From the streets to standing beside Daniel, Angela proved that it is not where you come from that really matters. The end. What touched you most in this story? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and if you found this story interesting, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting stories. Until next time, bye.